The sun hung low over the dusty hills of Andalusia, painting the sky in shades of amber and fading gold. In a small village near Seville, where olive trees stretched endlessly and life moved with quiet struggle, lived a girl named Isabella Cruz. Isabella was poor, painfully so. After her father died, debt swallowed everything they had. The small whitewashed house she lived in, perched at the edge of the village, was the last thing left, but even that was no longer hers. On a hot afternoon, a group of men arrived on horseback. At their center was Don Alejandro Vargas, a wealthy rancher known across the region. His lands were vast, his influence greater, and his decisions final. Isabella stood in front of her house, her hands trembling but her chin lifted. "Please," she said, her voice breaking despite her effort to stay strong. "Don't take my home. It's all I have left." Alejandro studied her silently. He had seen many desperate faces before, but hers was different. There was fear, yes, but also defiance. "The debt must be paid," he said calmly. "I'll work," Isabella insisted quickly. "I'll do anything. Just give me time." The men behind Alejandro exchanged glances. No one spoke to him like that. Alejandro stepped closer, his boots crunching against the dry earth. "Time is something I do not give lightly." Isabella swallowed hard. "Then what do you want?" For a moment the wind stilled. Even the distant sound of goats seemed to fade. Alejandro's gaze sharpened. "If you cannot pay with money, then you must give me something of equal value." Her heart pounded. "Like what?" He paused, long enough for tension to wrap tightly around them both. "Become my wife." The words struck like thunder. Isabella staggered back slightly, her breath caught in her throat. "What?" "It is a simple offer," Alejandro said, his tone steady. "Your home remains yours. Your debts vanish. In return, you come with me to my estate." The village seemed to shrink around her. Marriage to a man she barely knew? A man feared by everyone? "This isn't fair," she whispered. "Life rarely is," he replied. Silence stretched between them. Isabella looked at her home. The cracked walls, the broken roof, the place where her mother had sung to her as a child. It was more than a house. It was everything. Tears filled her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "If I agree," she said slowly, "you promise no one will take this house?" "I give you my word." She hesitated, then nodded, her voice barely audible. "Then I accept." Alejandro gave a short nod. "Prepare yourself. We leave at sunrise." As the men rode away, Isabella stood frozen in place. Her life had just changed forever, not by choice, but by survival. And somewhere deep inside her, a quiet fear whispered, what kind of man had she just agreed to marry? Alejandro's estate was nothing like Isabella had imagined. It wasn't just large, it was overwhelming. Fields stretched beyond sight, filled with grazing horses and workers moving like small shadows in the distance. The main house stood tall and proud, built of stone with wide balconies and iron railings. Isabella felt small the moment she arrived. The servants greeted her respectfully, though with curiosity in their eyes. They had heard whispers already, the poor village girl who had become the mistress of the estate overnight. Alejandro remained distant. Days passed, and though they were now married, he treated her with a strange formality. He gave her a room larger than her entire house back in the village, provided her with clothes she had never dreamed of, and ensured she lacked nothing. Yet he never forced closeness. That confused her more than anything. One evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, Isabella found him standing alone near the stables. "You could have taken the house," she said quietly, approaching him. "Why didn't you?" Alejandro didn't turn immediately. "Because I don't need another empty building." "That's not what I mean." He finally looked at her. "Then what do you mean?" "You made me your wife," she said, searching his face, "but you treat me like a guest." A faint shadow crossed his expression. "Would you prefer I treated you like a possession?" Her breath caught. "No, but what?" "I don't understand you," she admitted. For a moment he said nothing, then surprisingly he sighed. "My father," he began, "was a cruel man. He believed everything could be owned, including people." Isabella listened carefully. "I built this life differently," Alejandro continued. "Yes, I made you an offer, but I will not force your heart." She blinked, surprised. "Then why marry me at all?" His gaze softened slightly. "Because I saw strength in you and I needed someone who wouldn't fear me forever." The honesty in his voice unsettled her. "I do fear you," she said quietly. "I know. Silence again, but this time it felt different. Less cold, less distant. Over the next weeks, something began to change. Isabella started helping on the estate. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to. She spoke to the workers, learned their names, listened to their problems. Slowly, the estate began to feel less like a prison and more like a place where she belonged. And Alejandro noticed. He watched the way she laughed with the children of the workers, how she carried herself with quiet dignity, how she never forgot where she came from. One night during a storm, Isabella found herself afraid of the thunder. Without thinking, she went to Alejandro. He opened the door, surprised. I don't like storms, she admitted. For the first time, he smiled, just slightly. You're safe here, he said. And somehow she believed him. Months passed and the seasons began to shift. The golden fields turned green, the air softened, and with it, so did something between Isabella and Alejandro. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't forced. It grew quietly, like roots beneath the soil. One morning, Isabella returned to her old village. The small house still stood, untouched, just as promised. But as she stepped inside, something felt different. It no longer felt like home. Not fully. She realized then that her life had moved forward, even if she hadn't noticed it happening. When she returned to the estate, she found Alejandro waiting. You went back, he said. Yes. And? She looked at him, her eyes calm. It's still mine, but it's no longer where I belong. Something flickered in his expression, something almost like relief. Days later, trouble came. A rival landowner attempted to claim part of Alejandro's territory, spreading lies among the workers and trying to turn them against him. Tension rose quickly, but it was Isabella who stepped forward. She spoke to the workers, reminded them of how Alejandro had treated them, with fairness, not fear. She stood beside him, not as someone forced into marriage, but as someone who had chosen to stay. And the people listened. The conflict passed without bloodshed. That night, Alejandro found her standing under the stars. You didn't have to do that, he said. I know, she replied softly. I wanted to. He stepped closer. Why? She hesitated, then met his eyes. Because somewhere along the way, this stopped being an arrangement. The air between them grew still. And what is it now, he asked. Isabella smiled faintly. Something real. For the first time, Alejandro looked uncertain. I never wanted to trap you, he said quietly. You didn't, she replied. You gave me a choice, even when it didn't feel like one at first. He studied her, searching for doubt, but found none. I stayed, she continued, because I saw the man behind the name. A long silence passed. Then slowly Alejandro reached for her hand, hesitant, as if giving her time to pull away. She didn't. Under the vast Spanish sky, surrounded by the land that had once separated them, they stood together not as a deal, but as equals. And for the first time since that day in the village, Isabella felt something she hadn't expected. Not fear, not obligation, but peace, and perhaps even love.